Like any other system, the just-in-time system is built around principles and some foundational elements that work together to create what the customer needs, when they need it, and in the right amount. Over the next few modules, we will look at a few different pieces of the just-in-time puzzle. Keep in mind that the just-in-time system is a philosophy that aims at meeting the needs of the customer and being flexible to changes in the marketplace. In fact, for any just-in-time system to be considered successful, it must be able to produce any combination of customer needs. In other words, operations must be flexible and able to shift with the needs of the customers. This means that organizations should not place heavy emphasis on manufacturing environments or service environments that are make-to-stock environments. Instead, they need to respond to orders or improve their make-to-order capabilities. Some of the ways that the just-in-time system does this is by building to customer demand, creating, maintaining, and improving standard work practices, balancing lines in such a way that creates optimal flow, implementing pull systems, and developing schedules that support the just-in-time philosophy. We will discuss these elements and others in the coming modules. Be aware that for each of these topics, we will give you a general overview. In addition to these general overviews, it is important to understand that different companies use different tools and implement the systems in different ways. As you learn about the just-in-time system, these general overviews will help you get started, but some adjustments will likely be needed. We'll see you in the next video. Production leveling is a method of scheduling that aims to level out and manage the constant changes in demand. One key to production leveling is that it provides a way for people to produce different products and meet customers' needs without overproducing and building stockpiles of inventory. While the details of level production may be unique to each company, there are really two foundational methods that are used to schedule. Both are based around the measurement of takt time. Let's look briefly at each method. The first is paste withdrawal. Paste withdrawal uses scheduling boards to visually show what needs to be withdrawn and when. The boards are sometimes on a calendar, whiteboard, or overhead display that everyone can see. The paste withdrawal boards are typically set up to show each hour of withdrawal, but companies may experiment with other formats as well. The second method is Heijunka. Heijunka technique is used to assist and in many ways facilitate just-in-time production. Heijunka is often used to smooth out production both internally and externally. The Heijunka technique works by using a Heijunka box. The Heijunka box is typically lists products down the left-hand side and time intervals across the top or bottom. Kanban cards, routers, or another trigger are then placed in the appropriate box and time for workers to act on. This helps workers to visually manage what needs to be done and when. Leveled production schedules, whether Heijunka or paste withdrawal, are always driven from the last step in the process. This creates a situation where the final process step can determine how many of each product or service is needed to meet the demands of the customer. When the final step has calculated how many each product or service is needed, you can then evenly mix the demand. This gives a company the ability to produce items that are mixed and not in large lot sizes. With a general overview of these two leveling methods, let's now dig into another foundational piece of the just-in-time puzzle. We'll see you in the next video. age-old adage of what gets measured gets tracked is true with just-in-time too. In fact, if you are measuring the pace, demand, or times of activities, it may be considered a guessing game. So, does this mean we should measure everything? With every form of indicator we know about? No. It means we need to find indicators that give us a pulse on things. That's where a measurement known as takt time comes in. Takt time is a German phrase for the baton the conductor uses to set the tempo of an orchestra. Takt time refers to the rate at which products, information, and/or services need to be completed in to keep up with customer demand. Much like the pulse of a heart rate, takt time tells us whether we are beating at a healthy rate or we are falling dangerously behind. Takt time is most commonly represented in either seconds, minutes, or sometimes hours. For simplicity, we will calculate our takt time in minutes. To determine what your takt time is for your process, you need to divide the total daily amount of working time, or the net available time, by the required quantity of products per day. The key here is required. In other words, the customer demand per day. Let's look at an example. Let's say that we have 480 minutes of available time in a workday. 60 of those minutes are for lunch and break, which leaves us with 420 minutes of available work time. Our next figure will be an assumed 20 working days per month. We will come back to this. Let's say that in the current month, we have 4 different products that total 45,000 pieces that need to be made. Our first step would be divide the 45,000 pieces by the number of days per month to get the average daily quantity. 45,000 divided by 20 equals 2,250 parts per day. Now that we know how many of the 4 different pieces we need to be made each day, we can calculate our takt time. This is done by first dividing the amount of available time per day by the number of parts per day. In our case, we would divide 420 minutes by 2,250 parts. This would equal 0.19 minutes per unit takt time. So, what does this mean? To put it simply, it means that every 0.19 minutes, we need to produce 1 unit or we fall behind of the current customer demand. That is a little over 5 units per minute. Now you can try. Let's say that you have a workday that has an available time of 480 minutes per day. After calculating the demand per day, you discover that you need to make 10 parts per day. What is your takt time? You can write your answers down, start a discussion with the community, or answer in the upcoming assignment. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you in the next video. One can only imagine that if you want the right part delivered at the right time and in the right amount, you would need some method of management or control. Without one, you would end up with excess inventory or not enough inventory. The just-in-time system uses a method known as Kanban. Kanban is one tool within the just-in-time production system. Kanban is used to connect information flow to the necessary action or production of a customer's needs. The Kanban system works off the pull of the customer, creating a more demand-driven enterprise, which results in lower inventory levels, less waiting, and better control of production amounts. The Japanese word, loosely translated, means card, billboard, or sign, but oftentimes other sensory notifications such as empty spaces, cones, or lights are used to notify a supplier of a customer's need. In the purest sense, Kanban is a trigger. The card was an early method used to help people learn to act on a trigger for replenishment and manage the demand associated with the need. Essentially, the Kanban card and other triggers were used to help manage the replenishment and behaviors associated with replenishing inventory. The basic premise is that the pull begins at the customer or the end of the process with a leveled schedule that is based on only real demand or real expected demand. This demand represents what the customer is pulling for. The final process step uses a Kanban to pull materials or information from the previous process step, which pulls from the previous step, and so on, all the way through the value stream. A push system is the production or performance of any item or activity performed at a required time by a given schedule that has been planned in advance. Many push systems are built mainly to forecast. Push systems can also include issuing material or performing an activity based on a schedule rather than a need. Push systems create excess inventory, which is one of the 8 forms of waste. There are many different types of Kanbans that are used within organizations. 3 of the most common are move Kanbans, production Kanbans, and supply Kanbans. Let's learn a little more about the different types of Kanban. We'll see you shortly. Internal move Kanbans are essentially permission to retrieve or move materials or information. The move Kanban authorizes one point of a process to get what they need and move it. Many cards will show the consuming location and the supplying location so that the person moving the tagged item knows where to move to. Let's look at a very basic example of how the move Kanban works. Every step in a process has an inbound, working, and outbound point. The move Kanban works with inbound and outbound points in a process. Inbound areas typically hold a fixed amount of materials, sub-assemblies, supplies, parts, information, or data that is needed during the process. The outbound point holds the completed part from the process. Keep in mind that a Kanban could be a card, container, light, dolly, empty space, or a variety of other things. In this example, the inbound materials contain a move Kanban. When the next process step begins to consume those materials, the move Kanban is removed and taken back to the previous process step's outbound point. Once it arrives at the outbound point, it is attached to a new full amount of the needed items or information. Once the move Kanban is attached to this new full container, it is then moved to the next process step's inbound point. As you can tell, the move Kanban acts as a trigger, telling workers when something is ready to be moved. Here's another example. A machinist places his parts in an outbound stocking point. For his process, they are complete and he needs to move them to the next step. He places a move Kanban with the parts. When a water spider sees it, he picks the Kanban and materials up and moves it to the next process step's inbound point. When the materials begin production on step 2, the Kanban is removed and placed on another group of materials to keep the flow going. And that's it, a move Kanban. As you can tell, it's a very basic tool that guides and directs you through a process's routing
and helps materials and information keep the flow going. We'll see you in the next module. This type of Kanban is probably one of the most basic and used types of Kanban. The card is used in manufacturing and software development to trigger production. One common way for production to start is with a list of everything that needs to be completed in a specific amount of time. A workstation then provides a production Kanban to an area requesting the types of materials or tasks they need produced. This signals the production system to start. The production Kanban will direct the sequence of production so the process is not mixed up. In addition to this, the production Kanban will explain key details such as the quality and quantity of the things that need to be produced. Let's look at another example. Let's say process 1 needs to provide process 2 with a certain quantity of parts. To start, a production Kanban will be taken and placed on a board, in a dispatch box, or some other type of tool to visually manage your Kanban demands. Next, the Kanban card is taken according to order and production begins. The production Kanban should give you clear direction and guidance with regards to the production sequence. In other words, your process may make a wide variety of parts for other processes. The Kanbans should be produced in the order that they are placed on the board or in the dispatch box. Once production is complete, according to the Kanban, it is then reattached and moved to an outbound point where the next process step can come and retrieve the needed items. As you can see, the production Kanban triggers the production of only items that are needed. This keeps the lines full and works only on the pull of actual demand. This is a major difference than the traditional push system, as the pull approach using production Kanbans controls the supplying process rather than by a schedule. In this manner, the supplying process only produces what the customer process actually used, and the two processes become linked together in a customer and supplier relationship. When a Kanban system is running internally, the transfer of classical Kanbans into different areas can be established fairly easily. But what if you have parts that are made by suppliers and need to be transferred externally? In this case, a supplier Kanban is used in place of a withdrawal or a move Kanban. A supplier Kanban process is usually described as a connection between your external vendor and the internal Kanban system. This can also work with different locations of the same company. The companies can be linked together into a supply chain process via Kanban and replenish effectively. Put very simply, a supplier Kanban can be attached to a container that is located in an inbound area of a downstream process. When the downstream process begins consuming the materials, they remove the supplier Kanban and send it to their outside supplier. Here's another example where we have 4 different points in a process, including an external supplier. The supplying process sends a withdrawal Kanban to retrieve more materials. Next, the store pulls the materials and delivers them to fill the supply process's demand needs. This now leaves the store without some materials. In order to replenish, the store that holds raw materials sends a Kanban to the materials supplier requesting more materials from the appropriate vendor. The vendor then delivers to the store to fill the store's demand needs. Remember, there are many different ways that Kanban can be implemented. A best practice is to include any suppliers that you are working with to ensure that everyone understands the process. That completes this introduction to supplier Kanbans. We'll see you in the next video.